Hello, my name is Angie Mosier, and I'm from DS Benefits Group. And I'm here today with John Hyman, who is a partner at Myers, Roman, Friedberg, and Lewis. And he also leads their coronavirus response team. And we've been trying to provide our clients with some pretty timely content as we've all been going through this. And John was gracious enough to help us before when Families First came out. And now we have tapped him to help us as your questions have evolved. And we really dig into another labor and employment issue. So we really appreciate it, John.
Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate the ask.
Oh, great. Well, let's dig into this a little bit. So we had previously posted a video talking about the difference between furloughs and layoffs. And, we kind of rode that wave the early part of or end of part of March. And now that's evolving kind of into the what next. Now that companies are really trying to talk about bringing their employees back, or perhaps they received some funding recently that's going to be really helpful. Any best practices in bringing back employees who were previously laid off or furloughed?
Yeah, it's the question I've gotten a lot of from the businesses that I'm talking to is, what do we do now? Because people are home, they're collecting unemployment under the CARES Act. They're getting an additional $600 a week on top of the unemployment benefits they've already gotten, which means that for a lot of employees, maybe they're earning more on unemployment than they were earning when they were working, and might earn when they come back to work. Because $600 a week on top of an unemployment benefit, if you're at the top of the unemployment scale, that is over $1,200 a week. And that's, for a lot of people, that's a lot more than they make in a week. And so what do you do to incent these people to come back to work when they would rather just sit at home and take a paid vacation through July 31st when these benefits run out? And so, I've talked through with folks different ways to do this, and and it depends on whether you're more comfortable with the with the carrot or the stick, and how you think your employees would best respond. The stick approach is, this is your job, and if you choose not to come back now that we're offering you recall, unemployment is, we know there are, as of today, 20 plus million people around the country out of work. And so we will find someone to take your job if you don't want to take it now. And when those benefits run out, or the extended benefits run out July 31, and you're ready to come back to work, there's no guarantee we're going to have a job here for you, and we likely won't, because we know there's lots of people that would love to take your job. So that's the stick approach, that we have work for you. We need you back at work on Monday. If you don't want to come back, we might not have a job for you when you're ready to come back, and we likely won't. The carrot approach, which is my preference, but it really depends on every company's, I think, A, what they think is going to motivate their employees, and B, what their particular financial position is. To go with the softer route would be to think about things like temporary bumps in pay, so that the financial incentive for people to stay home is no longer there. So you're going to pay them at a level that's going to get them, at least on the short term, above what they'd be collecting on unemployment. And maybe you call that like short-term hazard pay, or a short-term return to work bonus, or something.
Okay.
You could think about things like retention bonuses, that if you come back to work on this date and stay through this date, we have this extra pot of money that's available to you at the end. So you're not just getting them back to work, but you're getting them back to work and getting them to stay for a period of time. And I would just caution employers that to the extent that you are putting programs in place that provide for bonuses, you need to keep in mind that if you can't disqualify employees for bonus programs, if employees end up needing to be out of work for like FMLA covered absences or ADA reasonable accommodations, if people are out of work for like medical related reasons, then you likely can't count that against their. So that's one, I think, countervailing argument against these kind of more longer term incentive programs, because as we know, as people come back into the workplace, but we know that while we're reintegrating people, we also know the coronavirus isn't going anywhere in the short term, and we're going to be living with this, if you believe the reports, for another 12 to 18 months until a vaccine is available. Then people are going to keep getting sick. And so if you're telling people, we'll pay you an extra X number of dollars if you stay with us through December 31, and come back to work. You come back to work May 1 and stay with us through December 31. That's great. But if someone needs 2 months off because they get sick with coronavirus, you likely won't be able to count that against them for purposes of calculating or purposes of their eligibility for the bonus. So.
Okay. No, that's great. I like the short-term and long-term incentive. I think that's a great option, to throw out there too for businesses that might be a little nervous about just the carrot in the short term. How far does that get me? So I think that's a great suggestion. Does employer have any other additional leverage? Like, for example, if they turn down the job, will that stop the unemployment benefits that the employee is getting?
It's hard to say. Unemployment right now, there's so much uncertainty surrounding the unemployment system and what would disqualify someone for unemployment. Jobs and Family Services has said, for example, that for coronavirus related absences, which would include layoffs and furloughs the businesses have made because of a downturn related to coronavirus, that employees are relieved of their obligation to demonstrate that they're applying for employment to qualify for continued unemployment benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So it's unclear. I mean, traditionally, if an employee turns down a job, that would disqualify them from continuing to collect unemployment benefits.
Right.
As an employer, I would certainly make that argument, although employers also don't have a huge financial incentive now to do that because all of these COVID-related unemployment claims aren't hitting employers' experience with the state. So employers aren't being punished in their experience rating for employees that are collecting unemployment benefits related to COVID-19. It's hitting the mutualized fund, which is spread out among all employers in the state and not hitting any individual employer's rating. So the employer's incentive to fight unemployment right now is really low.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, it's certainly something you could threaten employees with, to say, if you turn down the job, we're going to let the state know that we had employment available for you and you turned it down. There's no guarantee that the state is going to hold that against an employee and disqualify them from collecting further unemployment benefits.
Mm-hmm.
But it's at least something you could use as a potential, as we're talking about kind of the stick, right, to try and motivate employees to come back, to maybe try and get them to think about, do I really want to risk losing my unemployment benefits when I might be better off just going back to work? And then the other thing I would encourage employers to think about too, when you're trying to encourage employees to come back to work as opposed to sitting and collecting unemployment, because a lot of people might be skittish about coming back to work, might be worried, is it safe for me to go back to work?
Right.
Is to develop now. I mean, Governor DeWine, shortly before we recorded this, Governor DeWine announced that May 1 is his target date to start slowly reopening Ohio non-essential businesses. So we don't know yet what that means or what this non-essential reopening is going to look like. He said the plan is still developing in terms of what businesses are going to open first and what's going to be required of those businesses to reopen. But we have essentially 2 weeks to get our plans in place to what it's going to look like for businesses to either reopen or start recalling employees that are currently at home collecting unemployment. And so businesses should be thinking about things like, what PPE they're going to have for employees that are coming into work, how they're going to maintain social distancing, what kind of sanitization programs they're going to put in place in the workplace, what employees are still going to be able to telework, because we're still going to want some people to telework to enable those that have to come in to maintain social distancing, so not everybody's coming into work at once. Are we going to stagger shifts, things like that, to use this time to get that plan in place, but then also to communicate to your employees what you're going to be doing proactively to protect their health and welfare, mm-hmm. so that they feel more comfortable from a safety and health standpoint coming back to work, so that they're not saying, I'd rather stay at home because I'm not sure my workplace is safe.
I think that's a great point. And I think starting to turn the conversation a little bit more positive about people coming back to work and protecting them is definitely a direction that I think a lot of people are going to like to see sooner than later, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that same vein, as people are trying to get their headcounts back up and wages, for those that got the PPP loans, any updates or more clarification on just kind of general reminders to make sure that you do what you can to get that loan forgiven?
To the extent businesses are actually getting PPP money, and a lot aren't. I heard today that Chase said they're out of money.
Oh,
The SBA said they're out of money. Like all the money's accounted for in that $350 billion program. That money is accounted for.
okay.
It's unclear yet which employers that applied for it are going to get it. The loans are still being processed. Chase, um, which had a terrible rollout with the program. Sorry if anyone from Chase is watching, but by all accounts, their response to this was terrible. Chase has said that they have no idea which of the loans they've processed are going to qualify and which aren't, and how the money is going to be distributed. And I think other banks are struggling with it as well. But if you are a business that was fortunate enough to get PPP money, or if you're still in the pipeline to get that money,
Mhm.
um, you need, and you're concerned about making sure the first 2 months of that money is forgiven, which is what the PPP program allows for. The loans are forgiven. Um, you need to make sure that your head count now aligns with your head count last year, because to the extent that your head count is reduced, the amount of the loan that's eligible to be forgiven is going to be reduced in a pro rata amount from whatever the difference in your head count was from last year to now. Um, Additionally, to the extent you are furloughing employees, or are going to continue furloughing employees or reducing salaries, that's going to count against your forgiveness opportunities as well. And there is a grace period between now and June 30 when companies can either increase salaries back to prior levels, or uh, bring people off a layoff or furlough, or rehire to get back to a level that will allow 100% of the loan to be forgiven. So businesses essentially have 6 weeks, to the extent they've received or will be receiving PPP money, have 6 weeks to look at their headcount and payroll as to where they were in 2019 versus where they are now, and make sure that those numbers line up by June 30, so they're in a position to have as much money qualify for that forgiveness as possible.
Okay. Yeah, everyone's going to be getting back at it. Sounds like it. It's a good thing.
We
Uh,
hope we hope so. We certainly hope so. That's the plan. And just, this, my fear is that, and I think we're fortunate in that Mike DeWine has handled this the right way
mhm.
from the beginning. And I think we have a governor that gets this and is going to do this the right way as we're getting people back to work. But what we don't want to do is just give everyone the green light to flood the workplace back all at once, because the curve, right? So we've right, flatten the curve, and and all the buzzwords and catchphrases we've heard. We've done such a good job up to this point. What we don't want to do is everybody flood back to work and to school and to
Mhm.
restaurants and bars and stadiums and everything else, and have that secondary spike, which, if you believe the reports, would likely be worse than where we were before. And so we need to either do this, I would say, with a flashing red light. Some would say with the flashing yellow light, but we got to be slow and deliberate and make sure we're coming back the right way with the right protections in place, so that we don't end up in a position worse a month from now than we were, 2 weeks from now.
Absolutely. It's such a balancing act. And obviously, both of us support employees and employers, and we certainly will continue to do so. And hopefully everyone gets back in a safe way. I really appreciate your time today. This has been great. We've certainly continued to post things on our COVID-19 page, and we will link to all of John's resources as well as Myers Roman, and also on his coronavirus blog, which has been some great information and a resource for us. And hopefully we will continue to be there as you need us. So everyone have a great day. Be well. Thanks again, John.
Great. Thanks, Angie. I really appreciate it.